Okay, let's continue our work session with item 3.05, primarily consisting of our PPEA update, exciting information on the new construction of schools. I would say before I hand it over to the superintendent that I would recommend that the board considers taking formal action on what we received tonight, if we're able to. I think it is important that we keep this process moving forward with a sense of urgency. And of course, the longer we delay finalizing and let me say approving certain stages of the plan, the longer it will take for us to get these schools constructed. And so I do have a draft wording of a resolution that we might consider for that purpose, but let's receive the presentation with that in mind. Any questions or comments on that before we receive? Yes.
I'm uncertain about whether the school board must legally take action at this point. I felt that the PPEA process was such that certainly I can understand that you want to make sure that we understand and support what's going on.
Sure.
But I'm not quite sure, and I asked Mr. Cloud, do you know if it's legally required that a vote be taken at this point?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Right, and I'm not suggesting, I wasn't suggesting that there was some legal requirement, be quite candid with you. But I do want us to avoid bird walking in this process wherein, we kind of, go 5 steps forward and end up going 3 steps back for whatever reason. That would be a major impediment to the timeliness of this process. So that was my thinking, and so whatever the will of the board is, of course, that's what we'll do.
Thank you for responding
Sure.
to that. I just wanted to know the legal requirement.
Sure.
I'm very excited about what we're doing here.
Right.
I think I can never remember the city of Norfolk or any other place doing something so exciting. But as far as the legal vote on this, I just wanted to ask that question.
Okay, thank you.
Just a point of clarity.
Yes.
So I know what to listen for during the presentation. You're recommending that we vote on what specifically?
Okay, so what we're going to receive, the design is 20%, correct? Complete?
That's correct.
Okay. And you also have before you questions answered relative to the programmatic aspect of the buildings. And so my recommendation is that we will vote on the school board's approval of the design up until this point. That's what I was recommending. And again, for the purpose to prevent us from going backwards and forwards here. Of course, there are a lot of thoughts and ideas, about the building as it will be with any construction project. But I just think at some point we have to say this is good. We agree that this is good. And we're moving forward from here. Yes, Noel.
At what point does the school board begin to be a part of the conversation within the PPEA process?
Right now.
This is technically our first conversation.
Well, we've been in conversations all along, and we've been in the community conversations at the schools.
We've been in discussions, but we've not technically been in dialogue about the discussions that have taken place, about letters that have been sent, and I understand that this process is a very unique process under the PPEA project, and I understand why we have collaborated with the city in order to do that. But I really feel that the PPEA has been operating in its own entity, and the school board has been on the side and not necessarily been the board as a unit, been a part of this process. So I'm going to take very seriously any action that the board is taking.
Sure.
Because now it is becoming ownership of the board.
Right.
Versus ownership of the PPEA collaborative.
Sure.
So I take that very seriously. And as we go into the presentation, as this will be one of our first opportunities to have really good discussion about each of the schools, I look forward to the dialogue that is going to take place.
Okay. Okay.
One other
Yes.
question. So the vote that you're asking us to take, how does that tie to the programmatic piece that we just got? So
Okay, so what we're receiving today, 20% completion of the design of the buildings. What we're gonna get in addition to that, explanations, questions answered relative to the programmatic aspect of those buildings. And a part of our responsibility, of course, is to ensure that the design of the buildings, layout, yada, yada, supports the programmatic aspect and the educating of the children in that building according to the educational program and design. So we're going to have opportunity to have all of those questions answered. So we have representatives, of course, from the PPEA and the builder, as well as our own administrative team that can answer questions about the programmatic aspect and how, and what implications that has for the actual building. And let me be very clear. This is not Kirk. He's trying to force something here. I'm trying to facilitate a process, and I know that we have to do our due diligence. I respect that, and I hope that we will do our due diligence in a timely fashion. But I certainly want to see us move this process along as expeditiously as possible, even while we are faithful stewards of the responsibility that we have as a school board. Yes.
Along that line, then, is it appropriate to, use this term, assume that any action that the board decides to take, if any, that it links to the resolution that was provided, around that resolution?
This
Is that
provides,
right?
the resolution provides wording that we might consider.
Okay.
There may be some modified version of it that the board recommends. This simply provides us, this is a draft, some verbiage that we might consider for at least taking some official action. And so I would say at this point, let's get the presentation, and we, may all feel really good and positive about it, and maybe one or two things we like to see, differently, or questions answered, and but I think getting to it would kind of get us there. Is everybody good? All right, Sam?
Okay. Chairman Houston, members of the board, item 3.05, PPEA update will be provided, and I will open by saying that I think the board will recall that this has been a collaborative effort, a partnership between the school division and the city, and it consisted of 4 members from our school system, which consisted of Dr. Simmons from operations, Dr. Savigny from teaching and learning, Mr. Gay from facilities, and Dr. Thornton as the chief financial officer. Those are the 4 people from the school division that served on the PPEA committee. Of course, there were other members from the city that also served on that committee in collaboration with our 4 individuals to bring us to the point of discussion around the programmatic items to impact each of these facilities. And so that was a part of that discussion, and always the common thread running through that discussion. In addition to that programmatic piece, also the facility needs tied to the programmatic piece, and Dr. Savigny and Dr. Simmons played major roles in that regard. And so a lot of that collective work has been evident to get us to where we are this afternoon. So with that said, we are ready to proceed with the update.
I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Ron Williams and the Steve Ballard design team. They prepared a brief presentation, I think, a conversation that will last about 15 minutes, and that'll leave about 20 minutes for question and answer from the school board. I've already presented much of what is in your notebooks. It was a request of the city that you bring your notebooks for Ron Williams to reference as he moves through the presentation, and collectively we can respond to your questions. Ron?
Thanks. So, good afternoon. Let me spend a couple minutes talking about where we've been since the last time that we had a briefing for you, at least from me. The last time I was invited to come over was in the spring. That was prior to our public engagement process. Number one, we spent a significant number of weeks throughout the month of April and beginning of May getting technical input from teachers, seasoned and young teachers selected from each of the 5 schools of the areas that we're building the new ones, with the principals there and with the school administration. Significant amount of technical input from Public Works, Stormwater, Utilities, to understand site issues, transportation issues, things of that nature. Some of you did come to the month-long that we spent with public engagement. We had 10 sessions. Some were heavily attended with as many as a couple hundred people, for example, in Campostelle on the south side. Some had some lighter turnout, but in each of those sessions, what we did was introduce first the conceptual designs that you saw over the past year that came in the unsolicited proposal from SB Ballard. Then what we also did is looked at contextual architectural styles of the neighborhood surrounding each school, and then gave a couple dozen recommendations that people could give us some input on what did they like in different styles in architecture or the look of the schools. We compiled that and came back in a second session at each session to understand which direction architecturally we would go with in the 35% designs that we're achieving in the interim agreement. We also put those surveys that we did in person online. We had 785 responses and tabulated all that input and posted it for the public to see what the survey responses were. And then what you see here on this placemat, for lack of a better term, that is what the evolution of the designs that we were considering in the spring from the original unsolicited proposal concepts to where we are now. These were what you see on the right of the 20% design is what Dr. Simmons briefed you on a few weeks ago, and then the notebooks that I sent you a couple weeks ago as well. And essentially is where we are with each of the approval processes that we're working through. One of those is the Architectural Review Board. The Architectural Review Board is advisory to the Planning Commission, who then is advisory to the city manager on public facilities. On Monday, I went to the Architectural Review Board for a second briefing, and they did approve the designs for Campostelle, Camp Allen, and Richard Bowling School. On the 22nd, we will take Broad Creek, we will take Larchmont and Ocean View to the Architectural Review Board. Tomorrow, I'll be at the Planning Commission, and we will have the recommendation of the Architectural Review Board from Monday to the Planning Commission for Campostelle, Richard Bowling, and Camp Allen. And then again on the 25th for Larchmont and Ocean View. The SB Ballard construction and design team will be going out for bids based on these, where we are in the design right now, on Monday. And we'll be receiving bids by the end of the month. Is that correct, Steve? And then that will give us the opportunity to get a first look at what pricing could be for a guaranteed maximum price. The goal is by the end of September that we solidify negotiation of a guaranteed maximum price in order to take the comprehensive agreement to City Council for passage, and away we go in construction. A few call-outs. Number one, an evolution of Campostelle. There was much discussion in the public and with the school administration about what should the capacity be for Campostelle. There were numbers ranging all over the place, and I'm not going to throw those out. I'm going to tell you where we settled. We were at 1071, and where we are now is at 1149, 1147, excuse me. And that was with the goal of having 200 choice seats built in. So we are looking for affirmation of that programming there. It did mean an increase in the square footage of the school, not just to add the classrooms, but also you had to increase the dining hall, the gym, things of that nature. So it did add significant cost to it. The second was an in part response, and I know of two formal communications, a little sidebar for a minute, that we've had. One is which for the Southside Coalition, or the Southside Education Committee, which is really a task force of city's outreach that we do. We have task forces that the city council manage along with our neighborhood development and planning staff to receive community input. And they have a solidified committee and offered ongoing input to Campus Stella School throughout the process. They've recently communicated and asked for a response back, and I worked with Dr. Simmons yesterday on what recommended, at least where the questions they're asking, what is unresolved, and then, and what is perhaps either the city or the school system to respond to. We're prepared to do that. The second was from Larchmont community, and that was addressed to the mayor and city council, and the mayor will respond to that. On Larchmont, and actually, Mr. Jordan, you brought it up the last time we had a long briefing and discussion on the previous conceptual designs, I believe, about the capacity at Larchmont and a question of particularly the sizing of the classrooms, or could it be considered for Title I? Now, this is not my bailiwick. What we're here to do is deliver you a school that gives you as much flexibility and to meet your programmatic opportunities. Based on the Larchmont community's input and questions, and to answer that question that was pending from the spring, there was a suggestion to add some classrooms. Now, what we have in your notebooks is the programming, but you'll notice that it doesn't change the number of teachers that are in there. And what it shows on the programming that you have and that's posted on the web for the public is a capacity of 707. And that is if you were trying to target and keep a similar size for all the schools, with the lower grades having the 19-to-1 ratio, then we have sized the school so that you could do that if you ever want to. What it means, from my opinion, in reality, is it gives you flexibility within the space. You have some additional rooms that can be used for labs or perhaps a breakout of the band or orchestra or things of that nature, that they don't necessarily have to be dedicated for instructional use from day one, but you do have capacity. So you have a range of 707 to 797 at Larchmont that you can use in different ways. So that's what's built in. It also accomplished an architectural issue. For example, you see on the wing there that's posted on the screen, the first floor plan, where next to the media center, there was a significant variation in the elevation that faces Hampton Boulevard, and so it actually, from an architectural perspective, offered a better viewpoint on that. So what was added is on the first floor you have classrooms in the middle of that instructional wing that are in the middle, could be used for either grades, or they could be used for flex space, and then there were 2 classrooms added on the second floor as well. So an increase of less than 1,000 square feet, I believe, of that, but what it gives you, again, is flexibility. The other predominant issue on that site was dealing with comments about transportation and parking and things of that nature. And we believe that as far as design and program capabilities, all the issues of this letter have been addressed. There may be some subjective opinions that perhaps may not agree, and I'll identify one of those that's in both letters, and that is the use of gymtoriums. If noise is the concern, we believe in our design, we will address noise. That the partitions that are used, that the noise levels will not interfere with that type of environment. That the product, in fact, if anybody wants to take a field trip, some good use of them in a brand-new school would be a Kellum High School, I believe, is a good place that you can, 17 that you have in that building or something like that.
Right.
So we have a ways of achieving reduction of noise if that is a concern. The second is we are trying to build into these designs something that's achievable. To start to grow the footprint and square footage in separate facilities, we are starting to push where we're going to have to make material decisions that might lessen the product that you're going to get. We haven't seen that anywhere in the Commonwealth, at least, that auditoriums are being built separately within schools these days. So this is a common practice. I usually use common practice rather than best practice because I think that's sometimes subjective, but this is common practice to use gymatoriums. And we believe that is, again, that if noise is an issue, we can solve for that.
So maybe a discussion point here, and rather than coming back, I'd rather, if we have some questions or comments on that. Did you want to?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
I'd like to start the discussion on that. I clearly understand why we are wanting to incorporate a gym in an auditorium or a gym in a cafeteria for many of the schools from a funding aspect. However, I think the burden on the school board from the programmatic aspect is for us to clearly analyze what the needs are at each of these buildings. These are going to be 5 brand-new buildings that are going to be hopefully with us as Larchmont has been here for 100 years. And we want to get the maximum use potential out of it, not only for the students in the area, but also for the community. And as we have just seen over the past 2 weeks, and I'm going to use just Larchmont as the example, we have had torrential downfall of rain. And what they have had to do at Larchmont is they are having to use their gym and their auditorium as a means of dismissal for the students for a safety reason. And I think that this goes back to the letter from the Larchmont Steering Committee. They live in that community. They know best as to how things function on an every day-to-day basis. So I'm not necessarily concerned about the noise aspect. What I am concerned about is for use of the students from a safety perspective and from a community use perspective. I think that each community may need, again, from a school board's perspective, separation of gym, auditorium, and cafeteria. This building in particular, I know, it would be a best practice for them to have these 3 separate entities. Now, once all is said and done, and we look at the dollar amount, and we say, the council will say, we don't have the funds for this, then that's what ends up happening. But I think that as a board, we need to clearly understand what we are advocating for. And I would like to advocate for, if these steering committees, these grassroots citizens are advocating that their buildings that they're going to occupy for the next 50 to 100 years have a separate gym, cafeteria, and auditorium, I think we should try to do that. And I can definitely tell you that with Larchmont, for the past 2 weeks with the rainfall that we've had, not only do they need to have separate facilities, but they need to have, and then maybe Mr. Ballard would be able to comment on this, or any of the architects, some type of covered walkway for the students to be dismissed. Because what happened the past 2 weeks is a safety concern. And the teachers and staff there did I will go and use the word heroic. They were doing heroic jobs in dismissing the students so that they could get to their parents safely. So that's where I'll begin the discussion, and I'm happy to hear other perspectives on this. But I think that I'm happy that we're having this discussion now. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, other comments on this particular matter?
On the, in particular on the gymatorium, or?
Yes, on the point that no others made.
I agree with her.
Okay. Other points on this particular school, and we'll come back in conclusion. But there are comments that you all have on, I'm sure you've had this discussion before, and what led to your conclusion on this design?
There's a number of different we use as a benchmark, for example, some of your newer elementary schools. And we do want to make sure that the designs that we're putting, particularly in K-5s, let's set aside Campus Stella for a minute, that every school is going to get the same amenities. And so, as I mentioned, the common practice is not to have them separate. We don't know of a new school that's been built with a separate auditorium necessarily in a K-5 environment. And the current environment at Larchmont, is that's what everybody understands. I think if you go over to Taylor, you would see that it functions well. Crossroads. So that's the basis. That we are budgetarily constrained now. We're over. So we will have some reductions to do if bids don't put us back in target. But budget is not the only issue. It is looking at what's common practice and what do we have, and that we're delivering equitably, across each of the.
So if we have a gymnasium that is in combination with an auditorium, and okay, so I'm looking at Larchmont right now. Can children have gym in that building at all times during the school day?
It depends on the programming.
So something would have to sacrifice, either some type of art or cultural piece would have to sacrifice at the expense of gym.
Well, I think it depends on the number of students that are being assembled for that. In this school, you have an additional 1,000 square feet of flex space that I mentioned before, and actually more than that, because at 707, even at that attendance, in the past 10 years or in the future 10 years, you're not projected to be above 600 students. So you do have significant amount of flexible space for those type of activities that perhaps don't need a room with a ceiling like this. So that's.
You also will have a true music suite and a true art suite. So they will not have to utilize the stage for those types of activities as they have to do now because of their space limitations. That'll be able to take place in the art suite and the music suite.
So one of the points that they had made in the letter is that we've had to cut field trip use from our budget. And so what they've done is they've incorporated, instead of kids going out and doing field trips, they've incorporated guest speakers and whatnot. And are we going to be selling the school short for the next 50 years from their cultural experiences, as we've just heard in our presentation yesterday from Dr. Thornton about the budget, the state budget calling on everyone to tighten the belt a little bit more? Are we going to be sacrificing our students' experience from the lack of field trips and them having to use this area right here for that purpose at the expense of, in combination of with the cafeteria and a gym?
No, I really don't think so, because the art suite and the music suite will be true performance areas in regard to the music component and the art component. And right now, they don't have that space, so they don't really know what they don't have until they go visit somebody else. So those will be true 21st century art suites, true 21st century music suites, and we've put all the bells and whistles in there that they need to be able to do those internally. The media center will also be much bigger than what they have now, and they'll be able to utilize the media center for some of those types of activities as well, in addition to, working around the PE schedule. So in terms of sacrifice, and I'm a parent at Larchmont, so my child's not going to suffer either from this. So they're not going to suffer and lose anything because of the gymatorium.
I don't want them to suffer. I want all of our students to be able to grow and to have long-lasting items that not only this group can benefit from, but the generations to come. So, and I just see this as such a unique opportunity for us to build these 5 schools and to build incredible schools. And then the other aspect about this that I didn't mention earlier is that we have a serious problem with childhood obesity. And we haven't gotten to the point yet from the state to require 5-day-a-week or a certain amount of time of physical education. But PE is very important for the well-being of students. And if they don't feel safe doing it in their home communities, then the school is where they're going to be having physical education. And in many of our middle and high schools, it's not even a requirement every year. It could be considered as an elective. So, again, I'm coming at this from the perspective of a school board member. I understand that there are financial implications of this, and I respect that. But on behalf of a school board member, as an advocate of the students, I'm trying to flesh out all of the considerations that we have to have, and I appreciate the conversation that we're having. So these are all of the aspects that I just want us to consider when we're looking at these designs. They're only 20% built, so we have 80% more to go.
Brian?
I guess I had a question for Mr. Ballard. If we were to separate the cafeteria, the gym, and the auditorium, how much would that add to the cost of the school?
It's probably about $215 a square foot. So I don't know. And it's a square footage issue too. When the school starts getting bigger, the state puts a lot more guidelines on everything about it because they feel like the school system may put a lot of kids in there. So then they're going to make us make the kitchen bigger, the bathrooms bigger, everything else. So it's, even though it's only adding a gymnasium, there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure in today's building codes that gets added to it. So that's about what it would cost. Addressing, I think the school's capacity now legally is 280 people in auditorium, and this holds about 640 when they're having events. So that'll address a lot of issues that the school's having, and the separation, the sound curtain. I think you guys, the teachers and everybody, the schools that they're in now, they haven't experienced the new technology. I think they'll be very excited about the look and the sound ability to it. And we've made it long-term, easy maintenance sound curtain. So I think they'll be really amazed when we get that product in there. And I don't think they'll have a true issue with it.
I guess, again, my issue is that we have to build 5 schools. And if we customize in schools, it loses the essence of having the PPA to do it as one big project that's separated over 5 schools. And I would hate to tell Ocean View that because we want to build the extra capacity at Larchmont, that you're going to have to wait another 5 or 10 or 15, 20 years before we build your school. That's my concern. My concern is that we have a limited amount of money, and we have to make the best use of it as we can for the entire city.
If I might add, we were thinking, we haven't redesigned, but 7,000 to 10,000 square feet, probably addition to do an auditorium, add an auditorium to these buildings. And not only is that a more expensive, it's a tall space, it has more expensive fixed seating in it. It drives the restroom facilities required because it's an assembly space. And so I think that is a lot of the reason we never see these days a full-fledged auditorium along with our elementary schools. We do a lot of schools across the state, and we do have a lot of either cafetorium or gymtorium setups similar to this. And with the proper acoustics that separate them, the gym and cafeteria can operate separately. But for budgetary constraints, primarily in other divisions, that's why they don't have an auditorium at the elementary school level.
To your question, though, we will work up some estimates so there's an understanding of the context of that cost.
Okay, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Questions on other matters related to Larchmont, and then we'll let you continue on with the presentation.
It's really question and answer. I mean,
Okay.
that's it's where we are. Process-wise, there's not much more I need to cover.
Okay, Rodney, you had some?
Go ahead, Rodney, you go first, I'll go after you.
You all mentioned Campus Stella, so you can go to Larchmont if you
No,
want
I
to
was
finish that
gonna,
up.
actually, I was gonna ask one question, Larchmont, that it carries over to Campus Stella. So have we communicated back fully to all of Larchmont correspondence that's been directed to the PPA, or is there still anything outstanding?
That's what I mentioned. This was addressed to the mayor, and the mayor will be responding.
Okay, so that's the most recent, and that's the most recent that we'll respond to?
Mhm.
Okay. Campus Stella, you mentioned that there was an email that we all received,
Mhm.
and you all, Dr. Simmons, and you guys will respond from the PPA perspective, is that correct?
Well, it was addressed to the school board, I believe, and the council, so. But
We've
we will-
agreed on the
we will- We will
responses.
draft a
Right.
response for that, yeah.
Okay.
We worked
We
on that
will.
yesterday, Dr. Simmons and I.
Okay, great, thank you. I just think it's important that we're responsive to the communities that are expressing a great interest, frankly, in their great new schools, and we just need to be responsive to their concerns.
They're gonna copy us on that.
Okay. And then, moving to Campus Stella, one thing I had mentioned during the 2 meetings at Campus Stella, and I don't see in the design, and maybe I'm just missing it, I do think some children are gonna cross over from the residential area across the street on Campus Stella to the school, and I'm wondering if we need to put a safe, secure crosswalk and a light, and add that so that there's safety in crossing, so they're not crossing up at Indian River and going back down, because that doesn't necessarily meet the main entrance to the school. And maybe I'm not picturing it correctly, but I had mentioned that before, and I didn't know if that was still being considered.
We do have a mid-block crossing already.
What we did there is, I was fortunate enough to be principal there for a day, and then I followed up again. At that time, it was 740 kids, 680 of them came from the west side, on the same side of the street, and they were all walkers, which was really great. There's no question we'll have other students attending. But also, one of the things that the city and our traffic study engineer had suggested, if you could pull up the site plan, is and I think the city's already done this, and then we're going to enhance it some more, is they put in a fence across the big median that separates the two sides.
Right.
To prohibit, hopefully the pedestrians from going across. And then our traffic study engineers have told us how to handle the street and Indian River and everything else. And based on the traffic that's coming from next door and the way we've changed the whole bus loop and everything, that, he feels pretty confident that the traffic coming across Brambleton will be pretty minimal and safe with what they have there now.
So you're talking about coming across from Digstown?
Yes.
Okay.
And crossing over Campus Stella without that fence being there that would prevent them from crossing. Because
That's
it's
right.
certainly a
That
lot
keeps
easier to
from
cross the
just
street,
going pandemonium across the whole thing.
which is
Right.
what they've done at Brambleton near the Public Health Building between the EVC campus and the Public Health, is that we've put a black fence there, nicely done, so that
Right.
a lot of clinical people aren't running across the street dodging cars.
That's correct.
So I like the approach then, because it really, for me, was a safety issue.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay,
Rodney?
Rodney?
Okay, I don't really do buildings well, so I'm not gonna speak so much to the building side. It's the, program and the projected enrollment piece and how that feeds into what you've done on the building side that I have interest in. So, can you explain to me, the 1147, the choice seats, how that was determined, and what we are projecting the socioeconomic demographics are going to be, and particularly the poverty levels, based upon the live-in and the choice seats that make up the 1147, or someone?
Yeah, we had a design of 1071 originally, which was looking for a target of 1,100. You're never going to hit that kind of, if you have a goal of a rounded number, because of the way that the ratios work out. So when you add a classroom, sometimes it puts you at an odd number. But the request when meeting with school administration was to have 200 choice seats. That put us at ballpark 1150, which ended up at the 1147 when we added the classrooms.
Right. When we, before PPA, when we were talking about building a new Campus Stella and its number of seats and programming, the conversation was aligned with our strategic plan goals around diversity and climates that are best for student learning. And so at one point, there was a conversation around Campus Stella being the citywide choice school. And then when the PPA came in, other factors came in and changed some of that. But I know part of the conversation that was going back and forth between whether or not Winona was going to be STEM and Campus Stella was going to be STEM was really driven, at least from my perspective, around trying to accomplish at least a few things. One, have the best STEM program in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That, I'm just trying to start there because I don't see that in here. And that would help to drive the economic diversity for the area, and frankly also help to drive the economic development of the area. So somewhere along the way, the conversation around the choice seats went somewhere. And so I'm still trying to get an understanding of if, where is the number?
1147.
Yeah, 1147 is the end, but somewhere they had somewhere around here there was something that showed 9-something for the live-in and 200 for the choice. And one of the questions that came from the Southside Coalition was asking about the student count and its relationship to St. Helena. So that stuff is still messy to me because I know DeJean Richter had a couple of different recommendations when they were trying to pull in the St. Helena base into the Campus Stella base or build a new St. Helena. I guess the bottom line for me is if right now Campus Stella is 90-some% plus poverty, and if the intent is to keep that as the live-in base, and you're calculating 200 seats for choice, even if every single choice seat was not a high poverty choice, you're still going to end up with a school that's 80-85% concentrated in poverty. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of what drove the choice seats and what are we projecting as a result of what we have here now.
Along that line, as far as the economic diversity from the school system side, to speak to that. That's why the number of 200 choice seats remained important. You're right in that 200 is not the same as district-wide choice. However, the opportunities to begin to get the socioeconomic diversity and socioeconomic change really centers on that 200 and what our committee, within the school system, does to build in the process for filling those choice seats and doing it in the appropriate way, but in a way that is fair and that has the socioeconomic diversity variable as a requirement. Now, to your point about if we had all, I think you were alluding to, 100% of the 200 seats ended up being filled with even students that none of them qualified for free reduced lunch, for example, I think is what you were alluding to, then the net effect of it would not potentially impact the overall number.
I'm not sure about that.
In the aggregate, we would have to run the numbers to see what that impact would be.
I came up with 29 over 71, so it's about a
It
third.
it would impact it, I have to run those numbers to see what it would be, but
200 plus 90, if you said 10% of Campus Stone, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, I'm just guessing.
200
It's
plus 90.
probably higher than that.
Well, you're talking 290 out of 1,100 kids, it's 290 so-called non-poverty kids and 710. I mean, that's best case scenario.
And what we have to keep in mind also with the 200 seats would be that, you know, the likelihood that 100% of the 200.
Well, I know, that's why I
Yeah.
just
Which
used
would be that.
Yeah, I
And
know.
so,
That's
you
why I
know,
went
that's
to that
probably
extreme.
Not gonna be the case.
Right.
However, by having the committee work the indicators, we have an opportunity to impact what it is currently. Now, the net effect of that is, you know, what I alluded to earlier, how much of an impact would that be? I think it's a great start, but we have to continue to look for the capacity to offer seats to do that, absolutely. So that's why the 200 was important for us.
Yeah. I guess just for context, and this goes for the Broad Creek area school too. No, the name of the school is based upon school board policy. We'll follow school board policy. Keep in mind, that's the combining of Richard Bowling and J.J. Roberts. And so it was two schools that had historical names. And so I think we have to be careful about just going to a meeting and all of a sudden determining that what the name of the school is going to be. I think that falls within the, you know, the policy that you all just asked us to consider. We've had to deal with this concentration of poverty issue for some of these schools, including Campostella and the Broad Creek area school, for a very long time. And the data is quite clear on what the impact has been. And I know one of the things that we have on our master milestone chart is whether or not we're ever going to start having this discussion around these poverty targets. The poverty target started with the conversation around Campostella. And I think we have to have that conversation, have to have it now, whether or not that's going to be an objective for the Campostella school. So that's one piece of it. And then on the
If I can just address that piece, so in my opinion, that factor, and while I certainly agree that it has to continue to be a part of our conversation, because we've agreed that that's one of our goals. I don't know that it has implications for design. I believe what was presented to us here in design gets us there. Now, how we populate the school in terms of, you know, total choice or partial choice, you know, is on us.
Yeah, but we say that, and we've said that for 2 years. And if you go back to the DeJean Richter study, it showed, even when you looked at the live-in at some of the schools, they had some schools where the out-of-districts were all over the place, and in some cases, we may have choice in action. So I hear what you're saying, but we haven't demonstrated that we're willing to act, and I think we need to make a decision and then act upon it. And then on the programming side, and this goes for all of them, in the far right column for education programmatic features, almost all the descriptions are the same with, you know, whatever their particular theme is, you know, added in. And I think that for Campostella in particular, we need to be much clearer on what our STEM goal is. I mean, are we going to specialize in engineering? I think I shared with some of you the school in South Carolina that was focused on engineering. Even as we were having the conversation earlier about the previous Lafayette Winona School, you know, it could be some specific area in there, even as it's in the pre-stages, that it gives attention. But I would like to see much more depth in terms of what the STEM program is at Campostella, and that could or could not have some impact on the infrastructure piece associated with the school.
Although, can I just say something about STEM? STEM's a curriculum, right? It's not a
It's a
construction
philosophy.
line
It's a
item.
philosophical approach to integration of science, technology, engineering, and math into the everyday curricula. So,
Right, I think we just need to make that distinction. It's
Yeah.
not, I don't know that it necessarily dictates how the building looks or
And
how
I
it's
think this is where the
designed.
difference is. To me, STEM is a combination of disciplines. If you're talking about what you all just described in terms of STEM and use in schools, that can be done across the board. I'm talking about a different level of specialty.
Right.
I'm saying that if Campostella is an engineering school and the intent is to expose children to an engineering discipline that will put them on the path to become engineers, that can also have broad STEM characteristic, but it also has a particular discipline and focus. Just as when we talk about the medical program at Maury, that still falls within the STEM umbrella, but it's a specific discipline in terms of medical. So I'm looking for not something that says that what happens at Campostella is the same thing that can happen at any school. I'm trying to figure out what differentiates the STEM program at Campostella so that it is a magnet and a draw, unlike any other that we have, not only in the city, but in the region. That's what I mean in
and
terms of that.
we can provide that for you. The purpose of this document was to answer a question that Ms. Doyle sent via email.
That were 3 questions that came from Rodney.
Yes.
That's where they originated.
So the
So we're
purpose of
answering your
this
questions,
was
Rodney.
not to give the explicit definition. It was just a high-level overview to answer a somewhat generic question that we had received about programming. So we can provide that for you, but we also need to remember that we promised the staff at Campostella that they would have, and the community, that they would have input into driving. We know we're going to focus on STEM. We're building the building to have the components to focus on STEM in every classroom with the project space and the lab space and all of the components necessary to do that specialization. But the staff and that community have not had the opportunity to give us their specific input into, is it a focus on the science? Is it a focus on the technology? Is it a focus on the engineering or the math? And how does that link to swim? Because we've also promised that community it would link back to swim. So just as we're starting that conversation about the pre-IB with the team that Mr. Smeagol is putting together, it's now time, and we promised the community that would happen this year as part of the planning, to pull those key stakeholders from the building and the community together, so as a team, we can make that decision. I can provide you with the very detailed, specific things of what we've talked about doing internally from the explicit component of STEM and that focus, but that would be internal stakeholder opinion and belief. It has not gone to the community yet to flesh it out. That was what we had said we would do this year once we got to this component. That was on that timeline that we shared last year.
Yeah, and I think I've brought up at each and every point that I think we need to get moving.
So
We
let
don't
me
disagree.
ask this question, because now we're talking specific correlation to the design of the school. So I would ask administration, based on your examination of the design so far, do you feel comfortable and confident that the design of the school as it stands right now, these schools, would meet educational needs, plans, and goals for each of the schools?
Yes.
I agree.
And I would ask the board what further concerns, as we see the designs, and again, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to force anything, I'm trying to facilitate a process here, because I don't want us to get stuck in this process or get to the point where we just continue to kick the can down the road, nor do I want us to rush into, planning or approving something that will not meet our needs and goals for the next 50 to 100 years, as you very well point out. These have to be 21st, 22nd century schools, and so I clearly understand that. What I'm trying to keep us from doing is stalling here in this process. And so the better we all understand what is it we see that's giving us a hiccup, how can we address it quickly so that we keep this process moving is my aim and concern today. Because we can't be still at this same place November, December. We heard just yesterday that right now, as it stands right now, with the timeline we're on, Camp Stella will be the fall of 16. Is that correct?
Estimate.
Estimate. Okay.
If we break ground in January of 15.
Well, we're still working through the schedule, but that's estimated right now.
Understand.
Yeah.
Okay, point taken. And so, every day, every week, every month, we fail to, give a green light and move on with this process. We push not only Camp Stella, but every one of these schools dates back now. And so again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying we rush through this and not take due consideration, but let's be clear on what it is. We are either unclear or in disagreement with about the design, and then how do we address those matters and reach some conclusion as a board so that we keep the process moving forward. Yes.
Until I hear the motion, I can't tell you what you want to know from me. So I need to wait. Need to hear the motion until I know what it is I'm being asked to vote on.
Right.
But I want to be clear. I want these 5 schools. I want these 5 schools to begin being used no later than the fall of 16. I want these 5 schools. It's an exciting process, but the motion is holding me up.
Okay.
So if you're wanting to know how I will go, until I hear the motion, I can't predict that.
So let me pose another question here. So what exactly, based on these designs, and I know you've been very clear about your concern about the gematorium in this case, what other concerns are there linked to the design of the building that's giving any one of us angst in terms of quote-unquote blessing where we are and feeling comfortable moving forward with the next phase of this design?
I think I can respond to that.
Okay.
I've heard a myriad of questions from the community, emails from several, phone calls from others, individual meetings on the street. I am very clear that Mr. Ballard can do an excellent job on construction. I've seen his work in the city, and I'm proud of it. I'm very excited to have 5 schools. I have seen and overseen school renovation on a single school at a time, or a construction of a single school at a time. That was enormous. I don't know how I was able to survive that. Now we're talking about 5. Beautiful, amazing. I'm certain that Mr. Ballard can do it, but I'm not certain that the community is certain that they have been heard and that all is clear about what it is they wanted. So there's a lot of uncertainty for me, but it doesn't go to the question, do I want these schools? Yes. Do I want them no later than the fall of 16? Yes. Do I think that Mr. Ballard can do it? I think he can, and I don't want to say approximately. I want to be able to tell the community soon when we're going, and I know that our actions determine that. But I'm not sure of what I'm going to be asked to do tonight in regards to a vote, and I'm not sure that I really need to vote on it. So I just want to be clear about what's holding me up.
Well, tonight we need to do one or two things. I think we need to either say we're good with where the design is right now, proceed, carry on, or we have another decision-making point that we need to work out and resolve, and we identify what that is and make specific plans in a timely fashion to resolve those issues so that we can move on. Those are our 2 options. I mean, is that?
Dr. Houston, you acknowledge that the fact that we are being asked to vote on something just came to our attention today.
I do it. So I'm asking us to be clear on what we want to do next, whatever that is.
Right, but I'm just, so on the one hand, I got the book, I looked through the book, wasn't necessarily sure all that I was supposed to consider in the book. As a school board member, I received letters from members of the community. And what I've heard is that the responses to those letters are going to go out, but I'm not being told what the responses are.
Okay.
And then today I received the programmatic piece. And then I'm being asked to consider all this for, to vote on something that Dr. Stewart has even raised that maybe I don't have any responsibility to vote on anyway. And so I just want to be clear that I'm not trying to stall or hold up anything, but I am trying to consider what's been presented in the time frame that it's been presented and get feedback so that whatever decision I need to make, I can make it informed. And, you know, frankly, I wish we could have talked about this yesterday at the joint meeting, you know, because I didn't even realize that it was a big issue until it was kind of mentioned yesterday that the process was stalled, and I guess apparently it's stalled on our side, so.
No,
Well,
I don't know. I don't believe so.
Yeah,
I
no
don't-
one has said that.
Okay, I don't know, it just,
No, we are not being looked upon as somebody
Okay.
that's stalling.
Okay.
We are just now at a point where the PPA committee and Ron and team are here to present where they are at 20%, because they're at the point where they're reviewing this at the ARB and then going to planning. So we are in keeping with that process of review.
okay.
And so tonight's our night for us to get that
So,
information.
and the next decision point is, I mean, we are supposed to act on something at the 20%, and then when's the next time we're
Right,
supposed to act on
so
something?
no one said to us or to me, the school board needs to act at 20%. It was my recommendation that we would act officially at this, what I consider a significant juncture in the process, and it would hopefully prevent us, unfortunately, as we have had a tendency to do at times, going back and forth, because this isn't a process we can afford to do that, you know? And so, you know, the committee can't move forward, good Lord, with the design to get to 30-40%, and then we decide, oh no, we want more capacity, or we can't operate like that in this process. I'm simply trying to provide leadership that would prevent that. And I personally felt that a consideration of officially blessing the plans at the design at this juncture would help us make some definitive moves along the way. If we're not ready to do that tonight, tell me what your pleasure is, what additional information do we need, what do you want to see differently that you want us to consider, so that, again, we keep it on the radar, and again, it just doesn't become a can kick down the road. Now, I'll say this, it's not going to be very popular, I get it. We are not going to reach 100% community agreement on any building in this city. Let's just be realistic. That doesn't happen. So I think what our role is, so do we have to hear the community? Absolutely. And respond respectfully. The taxpayers build these buildings, the schools belong to the people, no question about it. And it's our responsibility to make sure that these buildings will meet the educational goals for providing the best and highest quality education we can for our children. No question about it. Having said all of that, at some point, we have to decide on the building. With all those factors considered, at some point, we have to say, this is going to be the building. And there's going to be 2 or 3 people that's going to say, I wanted something else in that building, and, well, I don't like that design. That's going to happen. I don't care what you build out there. At some point, we have to make a decision. So tonight, tell me, what information do you need? What additional step do you think we need to take? And then let's just move forward as a team.
You know, the other thing we can do too is, say, we're good with them at 20%. We know you're going on further to discuss things at planning and so on, and you still have to get to the point of 35% before you finalize your negotiations, if I'm not mistaken, with Mr. Ballard. So there's time between 20 and 35. This is not to say this is the last time we'll see Ron Williams and team sharing with us the information on the schools, because you never know. ARB still may come back with recommendations, as may planning. So do we want to set up another time where they come back? We say, yeah, it looks good for now. We have concerns about the multi-purpose of one room. We have concerns about diversity. We have concerns about perhaps 1147. We air those concerns tonight as well, but what we say is please address those and that of the concerns of the community, and we look forward to seeing you as you address those concerns further so we can have further dialogue.
All right, what's your pleasure?
I'd just like to say, in some ways, apologize to Ron and the Ballard team, because the conversation that I feel needs to happen needs to be a governance leadership team conversation.
Okay.
And I felt that way for a very long time, and I think I've expressed that before.
Sure.
And so the questions, like I said, other people can deal with the bricks and the mortars and all of that. That's not my thing. I just want to make sure that for all of the schools, the programmatic specifications that we provide is going to lead to the excellence that we say we want to achieve, that we provide them to them and allow them to go to work. Those are where I have most of my questions. But there are some questions that I felt came from the community that are good questions. Will there be a walkway, breezeway, or covered passage to the open classroom? I mean, will there be? This is a Campus Stella. Will there be?
There's not in the design at this time, and in fact, the comment about the movement of that is something that Dr. Simmons and I discussed yesterday. It's a very constrained site, and so we are, in response, we want to look at an alternative for it if possible.
Right, so that factors into the 20% how?
It's a matter of agreeing on an appropriate site that where it's feasible and it can be done pretty much overnight at 20%. I mean, it's a conceptual site plan, so we haven't gotten down to the site plan sometimes on some of those.
It won't affect the building floor plan, that's a
Yeah.
site issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, that's just an easy question to answer, but it's not my expertise.
Right.
But at least it helps me to
Right.
get a sense of the direction that you are going.
You know, the other thing too, I think we need to consider is that our role, like to your point, Rodney, is that it's programmatic, right? The PPA committee is determining the construction. That's not our bailiwick. Our responsibility is programmatic. And if that's something we need to have further discussion on, we certainly can, but I don't think that impacts the building definition or the building construct as we see it today. Other than, Noel, your one concern, and I know it's community concern, so not just yours, about the multi-purpose of that one room.
Right, and actually, the two concerns was the other one, which could be an easy fix, covered walkway.
Right.
For, or a covered spot for the Larchmont dismissal and students entering the building.
So aside from those two physical things that are relative to the construct of the building, everything else we're talking about here is programmatic, which we can have conversation with even next week when we meet. We can come an hour early and discuss that. But I don't think that stops the construct and/or us hearing back from Ron and team, Dr. Simmons, of what they're going to respond to the communities about regarding covered walkways and otherwise as well. Because sure, we want to know that, but I don't think that's going to prevent necessarily us from saying, don't go forward with 5 schools because I don't know what the overhang's going to look like. So I just want to kind of delineate what we need to really focus on, which is programmatic versus the constructs of the building.
This was the original letter that came from the mayor. We'll handle the building, you handle the specifications
Exactly.
and programs. What's unclear to us, and this is a process problem, and it certainly isn't Mr. Ballard or anyone sitting here, we don't know what all those considerations are. Originally, it left the school board and went to the PPA team. So now we're finding ourselves getting ready to vote on something that we have very little information about. So it's a process difficulty. And I think it would be possible to list all the myriad of things that have been raised and to say we can do it, we can't do it, whatever. That's one way to go. I want these schools built. I want them built beginning no later than the fall of 2016. And I don't think anyone's trying to be an impediment on that. But I do think that the process has a hiccup.
So let me change my language because I don't really feel real comfortable with the idea that I want to force a vote here. I want us to make a decision about next steps, whatever they are. That's what's most important to me, is that we are really clear when we end this discussion what we're doing next, so that we can keep this process moving. I'm not trying to strong arm a vote. I want to make a decision though on the next steps. And I think that's reasonable.
Because of my life's experience and what I've done, I believe that there's an outlying date that you need to say go. You need, and I think that date is no later than Thanksgiving. It may be sooner than that. But what's important to us is to know when we need to say go to you. I'm saying, I want these schools built. I want them built no later than, operational no later than 16. And I think we have a discussion process
Okay.
probably. And I think there's an awful lot that we may be asked to vote on that we don't understand and that the community doesn't understand. It
Okay.
doesn't mean that the community can get everything that it asks for.
Sure.
But it certainly can be considered, and certainly they need to. There's just a process problem here that I'm sensing.
Okay.
And the reason why I asked Mr. Cloud what I asked him was, if this PPA process, which I've never been through,
Right.
does not require my vote at this time, then I'm not sure I want to issue it.
Okay. All right. So,
To the question of the date, what would be helpful for the PPEA team is to have some consensus, whether it's a vote or not, from the board by October 1st. Because at that point, we will have some sense of the pricing, and we will be completing 35%, shortly thereafter.
Cool.
And my goal is to take a comprehensive agreement, if possible, optimistically, the first voting meeting in November to the city council. So October is where we have a whole lot of pencil sharpening and a whole lot of work sessions to
Right.
try to get a package
Right.
for approval. If I might, Dr. Hughes, there's one item that I feel I want to make sure for full disclosure. The mayor mentioned it last night, but I want to make sure there was an evolution that I failed to mention at the beginning at Broad Creek or Richard Bowling, whatever we determined that we're going to call it. And that is the idea of co-locating a library on the site.
That was new news.
The city council funded a library for this community in this most recent adopted budget. When we looked at siting and we looked at opportunity, there was a good amount of support or feedback that this would be a good site, good opportunity to also dovetail into construction. So if any of you are architecture fans and are, particular about your architectural style, that is one reason why we have perhaps less detail here, because the building actually, at this spot, will eventually have a library right in front of it. And you would have a vestibule connecting this door to the back of the library. And I don't remember if we have that image. That's what it would look like. It's a concept. We will put that out for a separate design build contract and hopefully to dovetail in with the end of the construction of this school so that then that commences and they can open as close together as possible. So that would not be your image at the end. Eventually, you'd have a building in front.
Dr.
yes.
Now, how can that be bad for our students? And how can it be bad for the community? All these buildings are public buildings, and we want them used for the public as much as possible. But the question is, we keep getting surprises, and surprises are not easy to make decisions about.
So it seems to me like the process that we need to undergo further, and disagree with me if you shall, that we need to have further program discussion, and we need to understand the feedback that the PPA committee will be sharing back with the various communities based on the letters or emails that they have submitted for response. And then sometime between now and October 1st, we need to demonstrate some sort of will of the board on the models at whatever % they are at that moment in time. Does anyone disagree with that?
Sure.
I don't disagree with that. The question that I would have would be between today and the point end that you mentioned of October 1. I would think that there would be some conversation or discussion across the PPA committees to get us to the point where my members of the committee will be able to bring back the information in a timely manner so that the board can make
Yes.
informed decisions.
Sure.
So my question centers on that. is that built in, or will that be built in between now and that point where, because I've had 4 committee members. And
Right.
So are we continuing with that process between now and that point to get that information where the 4 committee members represented
The
operation?
question between now and October 1st doesn't change from this notebook.
Right.
This,
Right.
this is the question before you, essentially.
Other than maybe small modifications you
Tweaks,
make?
sure.
Covered walkways, et cetera. And then the other thing is you said you would provide perhaps detail on what it would cost if we had to do, or if we were able to do gym, cafeteria, auditorium, just so that we have
Any of
that
those
information.
comments, what we would do is collect them, and then we would bring it back to the team. And frankly, urban design, or urban design architectural review would, aside from the architectural review board, would want to look at covered walkways, for example. So there are costs. There's also an architectural challenge with those. Their opinions about that. So what I recommend is that what would be helpful, I think, for me as the head of the process would be if you give an ongoing stream that perhaps on a weekly basis or but maybe Dr. King could help consolidate lists that we could respond to help get you to the point of an understanding of that. It's either, we can resolve that easy, or we need to consider cost, and we'll have to spend, looking at a minor design modification, or then if it's a major modification that we would, kind of put in those 3 buckets and give you some sense of that. But there really isn't, Dr. King, much that would change between now and then. So in October, once we get pricing, we will have decision points that have to be made. Now, I will add what kind of the further next step. We mentioned it back in the spring a little bit, but the further next step is once we get eventually to the comprehensive agreement and we're underway in construction, we're out of that procurement environment where the PPEA team as city and school system administrations, which are vested with procurement. We're out of that negotiation stage, and we actually, will have awarded. And what we're going to need then is your construction or facilities committee or whatever it is you call to start making decisions on colors and understanding what the carpet choices are and things of that nature that are into the details of the finer design that, along with the administration, we will offer that opportunity to do that because the award will have already been made and we're out of procurement scenario.
Okay.
And it would be at that time that school board members could be part of the conversation.
It's your committee, right? So we would come to you.
I'm just telling you, that's our interest. Some of our interest.
Yeah.
We just have to take time.
But that's once we establish a comprehensive
Cool.
agreement. And,
Let's do it.
Yeah, we weren't starting until 4 anyway.
Okay, Nora? Yes.
When the committee looks at the pricing for the separation of the gym and the auditorium, I know that we as a board and I have received feedback from Campostella, from Larchmont. If it's helpful for you all to do pricing on those 2 schools in particular, or all 5 of them.
Well, there's only 3 that are combined.
Right, yeah, Camp Allen is
Right.
separate. So if you just want to look at those schools and bring us the data on those schools, I'm happy with that.
Are you suggesting, are you saying a Campostella, because Campostella,
I know they have their own gym. They have an auditorium and a cafeteria combined, correct?
yeah, they have a combined, plus they have a SCOLA for
Right.
additional assembly space.
it was a 100-person.
Yeah, so I mean, are we?
They essentially
are you still
have an auditorium.
questioning
Okay.
The combined on Campostella, because I thought that there's plenty of spaces to make the needs of whatever the teachers and students will
There's
need
no issue
there.
with that at Campostella.
No.
I'm still receiving feedback from the community members that they're saying they are not satisfied with that. So I'm just bringing to your attention what they are bringing to my attention. So if it's a satisfactory space for what you're saying and what the administration is saying, then we need to go back to the community and say, these are the spaces that you have. Do you still feel that this is not adequate for what your needs are? And that would be on us, that would be our discussion. But I know for certain that's not the case with Larchmont. So,
Which means Ocean View's gonna want it.
well, I haven't received any specific feedback from them.
Once you open that can of worms for Larchmont, Ocean View's gonna want it, Broad Creek's gonna want it too.
Well, and I'll speak up
They have
here.
legitimate
I will say
preference.
that I would not, I'm not going to make a recommendation to the city council that has that in one school and not the others.
And that's
It should be in all
fine.
K-5s
That's
if we're
fine.
going to do it.
Right.
That's my opinion, and I wouldn't feel confident or comfortable delivering that message to the council in this package that one school gets.
So you'll just bring us the numbers for all 5 schools?
Correct.
And that is
Well,
perfectly
We can't do
fine.
it on Camp
No,
Allen. 'cause
we
that's-
can't do it at Camp
Camp
Allen.
Allen, we can't do it.
That's fine.
Yeah,
I
different-
understand
different
that.
thing.
That's different.
And they do have a segmentation from gym
I
and
do
cafeteria.
Yes,
understand.
we do.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'd like
Okay.
to say one thing, address a lot of everybody's issues here. I've been fortunate to be involved in all the meetings, and number one, I think it's important that the school board knows the city has never once said, Steve, don't do that because we can't afford it. So that's important for everybody to know, the public and everybody else. They've reached out to the community, we've listened to them. The other thing is, everything y'all are mentioning today, the public has brought to us, and this committee's addressed it tremendously. Now, maybe they just haven't been educated enough, but I think I'm a pretty good gambler. I'd say 80% of what everybody wants is in here. And I think the only, and I'm gonna bring up a good point, the Campostella teaching area. Now, I can tell you, the ladies that cornered me at Campostella in one of the 4 meetings, they wanted that outdoor classroom, unequivocally. And now, I'm not sure who doesn't want it, but I would put my 4 or 5 against that person any day. And so we put it out there. And they didn't want a lot of bushes around. They wanted to be open for security and safety so people couldn't hide in the bushes. So we listened to them. And they said they wanted to dress the front of Campostella. We did that. So the only thing I would say is the covered canopies. Larchmont has nothing now. None of them do. There's a pretty good sized canopy. It's not enough to hold 500, but it's 150% better what they have today. And for releasing the children, the hallways and security is so much better designed that they could stack these children in here and education caters, and they wouldn't have a problem. So I think the processes work great. I think, believe me, Dr. Simmons and Dr. Svigny are not easy sold on changing their minds. So, the city's said, okay, let's do it. And so that's in here, where the budget flies, we're hoping we can give them everything. That's our goal. But I hear a lot of unrest. I just think it's important that you know that we have listened to all that input, and there's very few things that I can think of on that list that we haven't incorporated, and I think they will be very excited. So.
I need to ask one question just as a point of clarity because it'll help us in doing any pricing that we need to do. When you talk about an auditorium, are you talking about a seating capacity that's 100% of the school, 50% of the school? Because it has an impact on the size and cost.
And I'd just like to say, Ron was very poignant in asking everybody that asked that. He tell me how many occasions on any school you thought that gym and cafeteria combination would be a problem. We asked the principals, we asked the staff, we asked the public. And I think you'd be hard pressed for anybody to tell you there'd be more than 6 or 8 days a year that cafeteria was an issue. So I think, like Dr. you said, we're never gonna make them all happy, but I think they'd be hard pressed over 6 days to spend $3.5, $4 million and maybe not build the 5th school or something like that. So I think they're gonna be surprised. Larchmont's capacity's gone from 280 to 640 in one city. So it's gonna be a tremendous asset. I think, like I said, I think the city and the team and the staff for the Norfolk Public Schools done a great job taking everybody's input and put it in the building.
Well, and I think we need to appreciate what Dr. Stewart said, because I think we all agree. The opportunity of building 5 schools is monumental. We will never have another opportunity like this. And I think what you're hearing simply, and I say this to the community who's watching and to folks here in the room, we just take this very seriously. And I think that the board just wants to make sure that they're going to be proud of the decision that we all make collectively. It's not that we disagree, it's just further due diligence, frankly. So if you can appreciate that, I think that's where we're coming from. And now we just need to talk about process moving forward because,
Right.
listen, we said we wanted 5 schools, and we're appreciative that the city said, we're going to step up to the plate, and this community is going to pay for this. And we're very, very thankful. So it's a huge opportunity.
You know, maybe the most valuable thing that could happen for us to make this decision is to have this gentleman, who's listened to all this, be able to be there and say, this is what the community asked, and this is what we've done. And I don't think that anybody, absent you, or perhaps Ron, could be able to do that. So I'm saying it could be invaluable as we have these emails and these lists to say, this is how we've accommodated that. This is how we heard it. This is what we've been, and I don't think that there's anybody else can do that. And it could be that would be very, very helpful in helping us understand and support. But remember, I want these schools back, no later than fall.
We have some of that in a document that we actually had it posted throughout the summer online.
Right.
And
Exactly.
we can give you the PDFs for that where, you know, Dwayne and Bill, for example, you know, they bubble the alterations from these to
That's
the, you know,
fantastic.
yeah, we could get
That's
that to you.
fantastic.
I'd like
Okay, and then I'll try to move us forward.
Yes, two things. I'm going to invoke the Voltaire, once again, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, in this case, great. And I looked up another one, Confucius says, better a diamond with a flaw than a pebble without. I mean, we've got some diamonds that are coming on board here. They may not be perfect, but, in the sense of the community, but they're still diamonds.
It's a
Okay.
tough process.
All right, let's press the coal then. Next week, we're scheduled to start a regular business meeting time at 4 p.m. How many of you guys are willing to come in? I would say,
2:30?
yeah, 2:30.
Talking next week?
Yes.
What day?
Next Wednesday is our regular business meeting. I would typically start at 4. And I'm asking us to consider coming in an hour and a half earlier for the purpose of this discussion. Now, there's some information I would anticipate that we would receive between now and then for our consideration. Of course, the responses to the community that Dr. Simmons mentioned from the letters that we've received. And if we really want some numbers, I think we need to be really, really clear with the team. I mean, you know, Dwayne asked a question about, you're talking about a separate auditorium, you for capacity for the entire Roman school, half. So if indeed we want those facts, we need to make that request tonight so that we can,
Well, I think we've made the request. Are you?
but he didn't
are
get
we
an
all-
answer in terms of the number, though.
In terms of 100% student population in the room at the same time?
Yeah. Right.
I don't know that any one of us on the board is equipped to answer that question. What is the current utilization of auditoriums by schools? Do they typically house 100% of the students at any one time, or are we at 50 or 75%?
We have collected some information, and I think it's in some of the files that was mentioned. We did survey some of the schools to look at the number of times auditoriums were used, so we have some detail, we just have to find it.
Well, we have the information on Larchmont itself. The current auditorium holds, what, 280? Is that what you said?
Legally.
Yeah.
Legally.
Right.
So I would suggest it's not likely 100%, but maybe could Dr. Simmons and team look at what the current population utilization is at any one time and make a good estimate so that you guys can then come up with a good estimate for that?
I would hope asking principals for their guidance on that, current principals, they'll be able to tell you. Are they going to bring them together, or are they going to bring the K-2 together, and then, I mean, I think principals can give you some reaction to that. But they know that. Don't you know that?
Where are we on 2:30? Is everybody good with that? I didn't understand. So
Yes.
Yes, our regular business meeting starts at 4.
And it's not about the construction necessarily side, it's about programmatic
Right.
and getting any answers back that they can provide regarding the build-out of the multipurpose into 3 separate.
Yeah, right.
And any answers to the
Right.
community that you will provide between now and then,
Yeah. And the PDF that was just referred to.
which is the comparison document
Right.
of then and
People
now.
said-
Can you do 2:30 next Wednesday?
What time are you saying?
2:30.
I'm going to be here,
Nothing, I'd
Ms.
rather-
Banks' lunch earlier in the
What'd you
day.
say?
He said, there's nothing I'd rather do.
Rodney?
Spend time with.
I'll be here. Noel?
I think I can do 3 o'clock versus 2:30, but I will look into that.
Okay.
I'll be here at 2:30.
Well, this is important. I think it would be best for the seven of us to be together. We do have a little gap time between executive and formal.
We do.
And so I would want to accommodate Noel on this 3 o'clock so that all seven of us can, all 8 of us, I would say.
But if we want to, we can come here at 2:30.
You can come to 12:30. I'm sure Sam would love to sit chat with you at the time of the meeting.
And then I think what we need from the administration is a full blowout of what is the programmatic makeup of these schools.
We can do that, no problem.
Okay.
And let Rodney, clearly, we want those in advance. Can we have them, like by Friday or Monday, so that we can read them in advance, so that we can just frankly be prepared to ask questions?
And if there's additional information the board wants, we would send that in.
Well, and I just wanted to mention specifically the Campus Stella.
Right.
In terms of why I differentiated in my mind.
Right.
So Ron mentioned earlier, because of the strategic neighborhood work that was done in Broad Creek, you have a library, you've got a Croc Center, you've got other things that are now leveraging off of the school.
Mm-hmm.
You got similar situations in Larchmont, Ocean View, to what extent I'm not so sure. But Campus Stella, as as DeJean Richter told us, is on the other side of the bridge. And so not only are we considering the Campus Stella, the St. Helena component, the impact on Lake Taylor Middle School. I mean, we just went through the stuff looking at priority, focus, and challenge schools. I mean, we've got all of that in that area.
Right.
And so to me, for the Campus Stella piece of it, to the extent that we can look at the South Side plan and those things that you all have been working on, and the longitudinal, I guess you all are calling it, impact of going from, whether you're going from the K-8 to the high school, or what we think the options may be, those that are going to be going to the middle school. I think we've got to put a special effort there so that the work that we do on the South Side is going to help advance those children academically, and of course, hopefully have some impact neighborhood-wise and economically at the same time. That's why you hear me kind of differentiate
Right.
Campus Stella from some others, because of other factors that are also involved in that big picture.
Gotcha. Okay. If there aren't any other questions or comments, we'll move on from this matter. Thank you all so much for your time. All right, due to the time here, is there any essential information, Dr. King, on community engagement for the good of the order this evening? Is there something we
I
can?
didn't see any
Yeah,
present,
it's
did
on
anyone see
domestic
presentations on?
violence. It's quick.
Okay. And then can I recommend too, Dr. Thornton, you did your presentation last night with City Council, and it's the same that we're going to see tonight? Is that correct?
Yes, I would plan unless the board had additional questions.
Okay. Does anybody on the board want to ask additional questions on the budget document? All right, so if we're okay with that, let's no longer do that this evening, and that'll give us some time back. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay, good.
I have a little bit of a problem with that.
What's,
Okay.
The gentleman sat here all night long.
I know.
Waiting to present to us. And you're just gonna say, I guess we don't, never mind. I don't really.
Carlos says it happens to him all the time. He didn't want us to hear that.
I don't like it happening to you either, Carlos. That's.
Okay, well, we better not eat up this time. Let's-
It's going to be all good. I am
Okay.
going to be very expeditious in giving you this information here. Just some updates, because many of you have seen the slides there, but our first official rollout of slides will happen in October. We're still kind of calculating a lot of the information, but the A+ Community Partners Program, particularly with the new website, is currently been rolled out, and we're currently conducting webinars for training for our staff internally. And the first physical report, as I stated before, you will receive that for the October work session. Our next item is the A+ Community Partners Tailgate. So are there any bookers in the room? This is your opportunity. Booker T. Washington High School is the site of location, and so the tailgate will take place this Friday, which will be an opportunity for the community to come together, along with, yes, Sharice is back there. Booker. But we'll be competing against Woodrow Wilson High School. So at 5:30, be an opportunity for the community to come together, find out a little bit more about what's going on with Norfolk Public Schools, meet with some of the staff members, superintendent, cabinet, just a great opportunity with the community to come together. And so that will occur at 5:30 p.m. In the school board.
Is that this Friday?
That's this Friday, before the rain comes. So be prepared. The next item is, of course, the tire awards. Many of you are aware of that. We moved the tire awards up because of the luck that I've been having with weather. So the board and the committee selected October 30th as the date, and you all received save the dates regarding that, and that will be on Thursday, October the 30th. And this year's highlight school is Lake Taylor High School. And the committee has decided to select students' recommendations from both our state champions from the girls' basketball team as well as the football team, and as well as to enlist the English department to recommend students from throughout the school to participate on the program. So it'll be all about kind of Lake Taylor High School. And there'll be some stories in this year, which will be an added feature. We will have a student keynote speaker for about 10 minutes to really talk about their experience in Norfolk Public Schools, their relationships with their teachers. I think that those stories a lot of times get missed, and so the committee really wants to highlight and use this opportunity. I just finished the invitations for our elected officials, and because of the timing, the Congress is out of session, so several of our federal legislators have already agreed that they will be here, as well as the invitations have gone out to our state legislators as well. The next item is the NPS Faith Partners Summit. There is a committee. There's been a large initiative to get a summit to talk about best practices. We have a lot of members of our faith-based community who are working with our schools, so we thought what better way to bring them together to talk about best practices and to share. And so we are also have extended an invitation out to Fulton County for a representative to come up. They have a awesome program that they have been implemented for the last 3 years. This will take place in November. Due to an oversight on my part, I said that the event would happen on Saturday. I'm surprised nobody caught that, but there are 2 large faith-based groups that worship on Saturdays, so it will happen during the week. And so we will roll out a new date, so we're trying to find that out right now, and so hopefully I'll be able to announce that in the next 2 weeks. The last 2 items is the superintendent's state of the school address. Elizabeth Mather and myself are working to identify the date in November. For that, the Chamber of Commerce has agreed to partner with us again in communicating that, and the only major difference in that is that it will occur after school hours, so it will be about 5:30, so that parents who are coming from work can participate. We really want to make this not just business friendly, but we want the entire community and to our families to be able to participate. And so we'll be reaching out to Channel 47 to also videotape this and also to make sure that the community at large can hear about the wonderful stories and the great successes that are happening in Norfolk Public Schools. And the last item is the NPS Distinguished Walk of Fame, which you all know is a project near and dear to my heart. That will occur in April. But the call for nominations will go out on September 16th. It's nothing special that it's my birthday, but we're going to use it as a lucky day. But they'll have an entire month until October the 17th to submit their nominations. The committee is compiled together. Both the mayor and the city manager have agreed to be our honorary chairs for this first inaugural event, and this will take place on April the 23rd of 2015, where we'll recognize 5 distinguished alumnus from each one of our high schools. And that concludes my report. Any questions? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman.
Good work.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. You did the same. All right. So we did receive the finance report last night. I would give opportunity if someone has any questions for Dr. Thornton to go ahead. I mean, I wouldn't ask him to do that report again, you know. But if there are some questions, if we could go ahead, I'm sure he'd be willing to answer those quickly for us on what we received last evening. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Sam, we had 5 minutes for you, and you can include your remarks in a major milestone, if that's all right.
I'm good.
Okay, so let's go to the master, I said major, but master milestone update, item 3.09, and we've designated 50 minutes for this report, but I do have to transition at about a quarter of it, so please excuse me at that time, but I will have to step out. Courtney, you will close out, if you don't mind?
Yep.
Ready to roll?
Ready to roll.
No decisions are made tonight. We need more time in October. This is a process. We're seeking coherent, coordinated initiatives that have been voted on or supported by the school board over the past 6 years since the recession. Step 1 through 3, we've already discussed these. There seems to be some clarity. In a minute, Dr. Gabriel will review the results of the question, do you understand these items, and do you support us discussing them further? The how and the what and the when will be determined at the next meeting, and hopefully we can have more time assigned in October. The next phase will begin exploring how and when part of these items can be moved forward. And at the end, we have a next step. The next step will be very important. I'm going to pass out the, I'm not going to pass out, but I'm going to distribute the items that you've already had, so everyone can have a copy in front of you of that which we've already talked about. Following this, there'll be another item to distribute, which will get to the request for anyone to ask any question and provide any information on each of these items. And now for a brief review on the understanding support summary. Remember, these figures do not reflect any decision. Why is it on a board and why is it up there? Because in my life, I have found it's easier when everyone can see together and understand together. And that means us together, the community, the school board, the administration, everyone. These terms here are further explained in the item that I just passed out. Dr. Gabriel will read the entire item. We have column 1 on the left. This is what people said they understood. We've had some conversation. Column 2, yep, I support moving to the next level. And the next meeting on October will be critical. Prior to that meeting, following Dr. Gabriel's review of the results, I'll distribute the next item, which will give everyone the opportunity to say anything about any of the items or to ask any question. Dr. Gabriel, thank you.
And just keep in mind that we're not going to necessarily discuss each of the items at hand here. We're just going to go over the results of what everybody has turned in as far as the milestones piece. So there were 19 points altogether. Items 1 through 7, items 1 through 6 basically are incorporative of our new school construction, which is going to be handled by the PPEA process. So what I'm going to start with is the new CTE high school. Everybody was in agreement with the moving forward with the CTE high school, and everybody supported it. Do you want to explain the coloring of the Post-its?
They're good to go to green when we are ready to go. This
Right.
is the process. We're not making any decisions. These
Right.
are not answers. This is a process conversation.
Okay. So next would be K-8, and that would be completing the K-8 initiative. 8 of us understood it, 7 of us supported it. When we're talking about the next point, inaugurating a pre-K expansion, again, 8 and 7. Inaugurate the open campus, that has been done, so we left that blank, done. Implementation of school poverty targets. We need to have some discussion around this, because 7 of us understood it, 6 of us supported it. Under learning time, expanding conversion schools' student learning time. 8 of us understood and 8 of us supported. Implementation of conversion school partnerships, and this specifically is talking primarily of our focus and priority schools. 8 and 8. Implementing a demographic study with redistricting, 8 and 8. Scheduling deferred maintenance projects, 8 and 8. Scheduling deferred technology projects, 8 and 8. Scheduling deferred transportation projects, 8 and 8. The next item under transportation would be Madison, and that was a board member suggestion of Dr. Robinson. The full item that we have on our handout is to move Madison Alternative School to Norfolk Technical Center once the CTE High School opens. And Dr. Robinson, I didn't know if you wanted to comment or allude or discuss how you wanted to.
Well, if you want to just change the verbiage, it doesn't, the Norfolk Technical Center doesn't have to be the landing site of it. It was more to repurpose Madison.
Repurpose.
It needs assistance.
Are you shaking your head, Dr. King, on that?
Yes.
Was that something that struck a nice chord with you?
No, I agree with that, I mean, if that's what you're asking.
Ms. Banks, would you be willing to change the verbiage on that to repurposing Madison? Thank you.
And that's due to the state of the facility, et cetera.
Yeah.
And the programming that needs to be
Yeah.
upgraded.
Yeah. There was some conversation Dr. Robinson and I had, and I knew that it was a whole lot more than just moving it. That was Dr. Robinson's idea.
And lastly, there was discussion of an efficiency study, and a few board members had discussed this. Ms. Doyle, if you wanted to comment on any, you had mentioned in your comments, we could discuss it as evaluate current efficiency study implementation or determine next steps to implement or conduct a new efficiency study.
Yes, and the aim around that was, as we begin the budgeting process for next year, we begin to eliminate the thought that people may think that we have fluff in our budget. Because if we've now done what the efficiency study recommended, and/or there are still things that we need to do, that we can do, that would help with our bottom line, now is the time to consider it. And if we have done everything, do we need to consider yet another efficiency study under the Dr. King administration so that we can be sure that we're being very fiscally responsible with the money afforded to the division? It was a efficiency study that the board commissioned in the mid to late 2000s, 2007, 8, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Thornton, was that it? I know you weren't here, but.
Yeah, it was part of the state's initiative to provide outside review for efficiency purposes. So I guess at that time, Norfolk said we want to be a part of that, so yes.
Exactly. So as it was brought to my attention, we just need to revisit whether or not we did it. If we did so successfully, great. If we have still things yet to do, or should we commission another just to determine how we're doing today so that we are being mindful of the money that, again, that we're stewards of.
Ms. Doyle, would you work with Ms. Banks to reword anything on that?
Sure.
To be accurate. It could be 2 or 3 stages in that one so that we will be able to address it quickly. Cool. Because we're accelerating our activities, here's the next step. Remember, these numbers do not indicate decisions have been made. These numbers only indicate understanding and support at the beginning. So what's important now is everyone take the opportunity to write any questions regarding K-8 completion, pre-K, poverty targets, any questions you might have, and to take the opportunity to make any statements. I'll give you an example of a statement. In the turnaround principles that were explicated earlier, TP3, turnaround principle 3, redesigning the school day, week, or year to include additional times for students' learning and teachers' collaboration. Under learning time, I know one of the things I'm going to write is to ask the superintendent to make recommendations how to increase the school day, increase the school year, use the summer, request through our state level representatives early start time again, any number of ways that this is going to be my opportunity to list things that I want to put out there for decision making. So Ms. Banks will be given the opportunity to collate all of our comments. This is a critical time. So that we don't have to spend time chatting about things, please put in writing those things which are important to each of these items to you, and make sure that we have those by the 25th, was it? Is that the date? September 25th?
Yes, that's what it says.
By September 25th, to give Dr. Gabriel and I a chance to chat and Mrs. Banks a chance to get all them created. I'm sure she would prefer to have them submitted electronically, but this is our opportunity individually to say anything we want to advocate for a particular item. Remember, the next step is about the how and the when, and then in the end, my prediction is we're going to see together, the community, our teachers, our principals, everyone see together a myriad of things that the school board has decided over the past 6 years and how they all fit together. And there's one emerging. I know the governor's school conversation's emerging, so there may be yet another one. And there may be other items that spin off from these as a result of this conversation. Therefore, next time, I don't think 60 minutes will do. So, thanks, Dr. Hammond. Done. Please,
You're
does
done,
everyone
Dan?
understand and support turning in their statements or questions by the 25th?
Yes,
We got it?
we understand and support it.
Thank you.
Put that up there. Okay, questions or comments on this process?
Very good.
Yeah, I think this is a very good process. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Noel. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
we have agenda planning in the morning, and so we'll take into consideration the request. When you say, how much time do you anticipate needing in October?
I know an hour will not do because we got to process these. Some of them you can see are pretty clear.
Right.
There'll be some that are going to need more discussion than others, and I'm going to leave it up to y'all to discuss, and hopefully we'll have enough time. I know we certainly need to finish this process by Thanksgiving, so that this will inform our budget conversations.
Okay.
And prediction is, there's going to be a lot of ease in doing this. Some of these things are just going to fit together like a glove.
Well, you all are making it easy for us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Your leadership in this process. Okay, is there anything else for the good of the order? We'll just go right around. Warren, do you have anything else tonight?
No, sir, thank you.
Ed?
No, sir.
Noel?
I'll just end with this. When I was purchasing a car, my dad said, Noelle, you're going to want to buy a minivan. And this was me going into medical school. Why on earth would I want a minivan? I wanted a sports car. And that's what I bought. Had a sunroof. It did have 4 doors, but I bought a sports car. And I got into medical school, and I got married, and I started having kids. And I really wished that I had had that minivan. And so my in-laws took the sports car, and I took the minivan. And I just want our school system to be thinking ahead when we are planning for our students, and to think that, yes, we are going to have many diamonds. Everybody's going to be excited to go into a new building. But we want to be thinking ahead for the possibilities of the future. I'm smart, I'm intelligent, but I did not have the wisdom of my father, and I wish that I had had at that point. So I'm just saying that we need to act both intelligently and to use our wisdom and to think of our district as expanding. So with that in mind, I will turn it over to Mr. Jordan.
Thank you.
Been hanging around Dr. Stewart too long.
You need to make sure you get your sports car.
Right.
Or get rid of the family, anyway.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah. Couple of things from yesterday's meeting that disturbed me. One, I think if we're going to have future meetings, joint meetings with city council, then one of the agenda items that I think needs to be on there that I've recommended several times and even suggested it when I interviewed for reappointment, we need to talk about the role of the school board and make sure there's clarity, in my opinion, of what the school board does as a governing body over the school system and what the council does as our appropriating body, partner, and supporter. Because I think there's still confusion there. I think we should take the leadership in trying to clarify that. So I know it was mentioned yesterday about future meetings. I'm putting out there now that if it comes up in the opportunity for an agenda item, I think that's something that we should discuss and be prepared to talk about. The second item was the comment at the end. So we talked about climate earlier, and bullying and so forth. And so I don't know what's going on with, all this conversation about what school board members need to do and, what our support is of you as our chair. But that's twice in the last 2 months that I feel like there's been bullying and coercion involved. And I would like for this board to.
Y'all ain't gonna keep putting me in the middle of that stuff.
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
I'm just saying, I like for this
Saying
board.
too.
I like for this board to either work on the communication and clarity there so we don't continue to have these things pop up, or if it's something that needs to occur one-on-one from school board members to city council members, I'm more than willing to do that. But I just thought it was unfair and inappropriate for that to be thrown out there the way it was. So whatever we have to do to resolve it so that we can work together as a team and we can work in collaboration with our partners as a team, I like to do it. And I'm open to any suggestions in order to try to get us moving together in that regard.
Thank you. Van?
I'm going to go in a little bit different direction here. I've been, since the day I started on the school board, I've been an advocate for and beating the drum that Norfolk Public Schools is a great place to have your children go to school. And I just wanted to bring this attention since we're streaming this. NPS continues to emphasize participation in AP courses last year. NPS had a 49% increase in the number of AP exams taken and a 34% increase in the number of qualifying exam scores. That's something to be trumpeted. That proves that we're striving to raise the floor and the ceiling for the entire district. So I just want to applaud the hard work that's going on and encourage more of it.
Thank you, Brad. Sam?
No more than simply thank the members of the team for the work that they did earlier on to be prepared for tonight's sessions so that the board can make informed decisions. So thank you to the members of cabinet and any supporters of your departments, for those that are still with us. I appreciate your work. That's it.
Thank you. Courtney?
I will echo what Dr. Robinson said. What we have here are copies of the Strive and Grow, and that was put together for us as board members at my request so that we could share those with friends, colleagues, and neighbors as we go out and speak, and people ask, how's the division doing, and we can speak the good word of how well we are doing. This is also online, I know, on norfolk.edu, so I'm happy to say for those that don't see us in person that they can get this online. But I do think this is a nice report for us to be able to share the good work that has been accomplished over the last year. And I want to congratulate the administration on their great work that made this happen, as well as those who are in the schools, and especially our children who work very hard to be great students.
Thank you. Okay, and I'd like to thank the team around the table for your continued good work. We're in our second week of school and for this year. I've already had a few challenges. I think it'll be helpful in the very near future, and I'll get with Sam and we'll process it for the board to be informed about the decision-making process as it relates to inclement weather. I know that can be a challenging decision-making process, whether it's snow or flooding or what have you, and we know it sends kind of a ripple effect, throughout the community with regards to parents and the transporting of children, and it also creates a bit of chaos in the school buildings themselves as principals are trying to manage it all. But I think the more informed we are as a team about how that process works, we can both not just appreciate but even help communicate it as we may receive phone calls, concerns or complaints, and legitimately so. But I think the more armed we are with information about the how decision is made, why, and even about how we communicate. I think we are all in this together, so while we have a communication department and team to get the word out, I think as a board, if we can communicate to our stakeholders about safety and process related to this, I think that would be helpful as well. I feel good about where we're going. I've said this before with our agendas and with our presentations. I really think we're getting right where we need to be, getting the information that we need, that will really help us to move toward the milestone work that we're doing. And so, thank you all for great work, and we stand adjourned. Have a good evening. See you next Wednesday, not before.